Hello, this is Paul Quinn from the Chichester Centre for Fairy Tale, Fantasy and Speculative Fiction, and I'm joined again by Meg Hare, my co-presenter, I think we can now say. And this isn't quite a fairy tale in unexpected places, but because it's Lent and we're rapidly approaching Easter, we're looking at figures who are a bit like Jesus in TV and film fantasy.
We are indeed.
Yeah. Particularly the figure who dies and goes down to the underworld and comes back again. So we're looking at heroes in fantasy who resurrection figures. But the descent into the underworld, I think, is crucial, because as this is a background, those of you of more theological bent who are watching this will know Jesus isn't the only God who dies in human form and goes into the underworld and then comes back again. Dionysus does it, Adonis does it, I think Osiris does it, and another Egyptian god. So there's something going on in that medieval, in that Mediterranean and Near East culture at the time of the first Christians, which is either a way of co-opting an existing narrative or establishing a new church with existing narratives. But for us going forward, I think, because that becomes the dominant Western narrative, it's interesting when we see Jesus figures in fantasy. So, Meg, where do we want to start?
I think Superman is, obviously I've started the Batman fan club already, so
Yeah, so
continue on the
Superman.
street.
So let's keep on with DC. So how is Jesus manifesting in the Superman narrative?
Well, I think it starts off when he starts getting movies. Like in the comics, he was originally an actual communist. Like, that's not a joke. And then he, after the Second World War, he starts getting more movies, and they sort of create this Christ-like figure in him, and that he believes all people are good, like the belief in the goodness of humanity, and he frequently dies and comes back to life. That's in the comics, as well as obviously Snyder's Superman.
Yes, if we mention it.
My personal enemy.
Yes.
Like, he literally has Connell literally has "We Are Gods," like, from his dad, about to show how sort of he has to create that figure and be that figure for humanity to follow as Jesus, and also all the crucifixion narratives.
Where are the crucifixion narratives in
Oh, they just have him T-posing all the time, and then also in I want to say Smallville, he's literally crucified, like he's put on a cross.
It's interesting, because I'm right, because I think you're the expert in the room on Superman, that the original authors of the comic strip are from the Jewish American community.
Yes.
And so Superman is simultaneously a Jewish figure, but he becomes this kind of washed, this Christian figure, as it truth, justice, and the American way.
Yeah.
So how do we account for that kind of transformation? Because that's a weird thing, that he starts off from a particular group. And isn't there one comic strip where he punches out Hitler?
Yeah.
So he becomes the great defender and against the great anti-Semite, and then he's transformed. Is that through the films or when the other comic writers?
Well, I think it is the films that then shift into the comics, because I think he does begin as that Moses figure, where he's not got like this group following him around, like praising him, like he's not teaching anything. He just believes in the goodness of doing good thing, like the whole saving a cat from a tree, whilst also like saving a burning building. Like, everything is good to him.
Yeah. Like,
there's no way up. And it's really interesting because the most recent DC production of Superman is on Adult Swim, and that's My Adventures with Superman, which is like I really hope people have watched it because it's so good, and it's like a kids-ish thing, but they have reintroduced the focus on the two identities, because if you've interacted with Superman media recently, you'll notice that it's primarily he's Superman and also Clark Kent, but he's Superman, and I think that adds to the Jesus narrative as well. Because they shifted from that, he's no longer balancing those two identities, which is obviously a Jewish American experience, and they move into just, he's Superman, he's a god, he's Jesus, and it's like, oh, okay.
Because there is a discussion, isn't there? Is he Clark Kent and then he becomes Superman, or he's Superman and he becomes Clark Kent? Because there's something about duality in that, and if you predicate one over the other, that's not really what the story's asking you to do. So the second Superman film, from the original Richard Donner and Lester's running with Christopher Reeve, where he literally becomes human in the second one.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take on that, as what it is when you lose that divine power. So this is really where we're going with that. But then he has to be Superman, or to be that double figure, he has to have those superpowers. Of course, at the end, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen a film from 1979 that's always on ITV4 and Sky, he becomes Superman again, so he has that dual nature. Where's the descent into the underworld?
He's killed like a lot.
And but he's just dying. Does he actually go down into the
I
underworld?
think so, because he comes back evil. He comes back altered a lot of the time. And I think that sort of shows that he's gone somewhere. Specifically in Batman v Superman, which I feel the need to say my dad loves. I'm not allowed to slander it too much.
Yeah.
It's an okay movie. He comes back so alarmingly different, and then he's only saved by that pure love from Lois Lane, from his mum and dad.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of suggests that going into the underworld. And also the redemption of the divine through his two identities becoming one, because they don't love Superman, they love Clark Kent.
The mother is interesting as well, of course, because it's a sole mother, it's a sole parent left at the end. So, Jonathan Kent famously dies. It's a devastating scene in the original Reeves. She's Martha as well, of course. We're thinking Mary and Martha there as well. It's also it might be accidental on Snyder's part. Oh no, it's not, because Martha. She's Martha in the existing. But yeah, I think I hadn't thought of that her there at the end, because I haven't seen Batman vs Superman for a while. It's kind of terrible in many ways, and they do make the cretinous link between Martha Wayne and Martha Kent.
Yeah.
That's pained you.
Well, it's also I think it's really interesting in the way they make him interact with Batman, because Batman's how do you bleed, which defeats the point of Batman. I just want to add that. But do you bleed? Because then it is that questioning of, is Superman a god?
Yes.
Can he be injured?
Whereas, of course, as you see in Holy Week, Jesus certainly can be injured.
Yeah.
That's that kind of corporeality about the physical body of Christ, I think people have trouble with. I think there's also this issue around hell, which is why some of these versions of Jesus that turn up in fantasy media often miss out that descent, and so you have to read it in as the way you've done there. Where else do we see this kind of resurrected God figure in fantasy?
I think we should discuss Star Wars, despite how...
Always discuss Star Wars.
Always discuss Star Wars, despite how tricky it is to discuss it in this capacity.
So, who's the Jesus figure in Star Wars?
I vote Luke.
Why?
Because he's originally that teacher figure. Well, not originally, but he is taught, and then he becomes that teacher figure for Rey, and also for Leia. We're showing him teaching Leia.
Yes.
And then he does that sacrifice. It's that thing of dissent that I'm like, but obviously, could it be argued whilst he doesn't literally die, when he goes and he boards himself away, and he descends into that, he descends from the Jedi status because he doesn't want to be that person anymore. So
it's a metaphorical descent rather than a literal descent.
And he sacrifices himself. He sacrifices everything he knows.
Yes.
Because he recognizes that that's too much power for one person to have. Obviously, he's wrong.
Yes.
We have 3 movies proving that, but comes back, and then that it's the fantasy of when he fights Kylo in the famed second movie of that trilogy.
Yes.
He fights Kylo and he comes back.
He does come back, and he sacrifices himself at that point as well, doesn't he, for a greater good? I suppose the problem is that the original Star Wars film is a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And Luke is occupying a different space there. And then you get prophecy turns up, doesn't it, in the prequels?
Yes.
That there is this messianic figure they're expecting who will bring balance to the Force.
But the chosen one.
The chosen one, yeah, that's what I'm looking for, not messianic, although he is occupying that type of narrative space. And so if you miss out the most recent 3 films, which some people might like to do, I wouldn't be with them. I think Force Awakens is a very good film. I got the frisson where I heard the theme tune building in the trailer. The second one I'm not so sure about. And Abrams is kind of just a fan fiction with a lot of money anyway. But
Yeah.
in the prequels and the original three, I think there's something there that this is really Anakin's story. And so his descent into hell is both the descent as he becomes corrupted by the dark side, but also I think what's that planet full of fire and molten lava where he gets chopped up and burned?
He said, ask me actual questions.
You know where I mean,
I know
though, where he has the last confrontation in that sequence with Obi-Wan. And there's a sense that that's a descent into hell there. But of course, then when he's resurrected, it says this kind of cyborg,
evil guy.
Yeah, and so it doesn't quite work. So I think probably you're right that Luke is the Jesus figure there. But it's all very complicated because it is a question of who's the hero in these films.
I think Anakin, you can look as evil Jesus. Lucifer.
Antichrist. Yeah. I think that's right. I think the problem is because Lucas doesn't do the 9 film sequence he originally planned, and it becomes a trilogy, and it starts as a fairy tale, and then becomes kind of a Greek tragedy, and then it looks like it's about Anakin's redemption at the end of it, because there's a lot in there about killing father figures in order for the child to emerge, which isn't really tracking with the Jesus narrative at all. But then when you put the prequels on and then the sequels, then I think you're close to it as the kind of teacher figure. I think that's the crucial bit.
Yeah.
Say.
And also, I think Luke as Jesus continues to work, like, no matter, because I mean, even his origins are similar to Jesus, that like desert boy from nobody.
Yeah.
Like, but I think Star Wars is a complex thing.
I think you go into the wider media as well, of course, into the books then become myths. He establishes or essentially re-establishes a religion or a new version of existing religion. So I think there he does become that kind of teacher prophet type figure. So it is complicated, but I think it is touching some of these basic beat points of dominant Judeo-Christian narratives in Western media, even if they've just then moved from being belief into another myth that you can make use of. So where do you go after Star Wars?
The Doctor. As Doctor Who fans, we have to legally bring him up.
We do. So who are we looking at? Where are we looking?
I think it starts with Tom Baker.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Go on then.
Tom Baker himself called the Fourth Doctor like a perfect man.
Right.
And I think that his bumbling sort of attitude of forgiveness.
The Doctor rather than Tom Baker's bumbling attitude of forgiveness. The character of the Doctor. Yeah. So where are we going?
I just start calling out Tom Baker.
Tom Baker's messianic figure.
He's my Jesus.
I've met him and I've spoken on the phone. So years ago, when he was plugging his weird book, The Boy Who Kicked Pigs. But that's a story for another day.
I'm questioning you about that later. I just think he works as a messianic figure, and then also you can do with Martha with 10. She spreads the word.
She does.
The Doctor.
She does.
Being like, and also obviously the Doctor of War. The first thing that's out of the Doctor of War, he has no weapons.
Yes.
All of Heaven Sent and Hellbent.
Yes.
And then also
Hellbent is awesome, by the way.
Hellbent is the best episode.
Yeah, it's great. Heaven Sent is 10 awesome minutes with a lot of other stuff before it.
But Hellbent is unreal. And then Waters of Mars, Dark Messiah, shows how he sort of falls into that quite literal hell.
Yes.
And then he's reunited as this Dark Messiah, which I think works because then as he regenerates, he obviously becomes 11, which I know there's a lot in between there, but I think that starts the darker route for the Doctor. And then with 11, you have him come back to life into much, not actually naive, but acts a lot more naive.
Yes.
With 11.
And I suppose it's 11 where we get the whole War Doctor narrative in the sense of emerging kind of recovered memories of when he's not been the Doctor. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I was going to be far more literal and just go Paul McGann. Because if you think about the McGann thing, they get regeneration very, very wrong. McGann says quite explicitly, I was dead too long this time.
Yeah.
That's not what regeneration is, people. If you also look, he's in a freezer unit in the morgue. And although we're meant to read it alongside the film version of Frankenstein, which is being watched by the morgue attendant, when he kicks the door open, he's completely enshrouded. He is, for all intents and purposes, Jesus emerging from the two. And then at the end of it, there's an act of faith with the master. When the awesome Eric Roberts, and he is a brilliant master, and he is a kind of demonic figure, because of course, if you remember, he's turned into that kind of snake plasm thing, and he already rapes Bruce in order to take over his body, and then kills Bruce's wife, and he tempts Xiao Yung, isn't it? I think. Then at the end, when he's about to be sucked into the TARDIS, the Doctor says, "Give me your hand." And for those of you who know King Lear, of course, that's the great act of faith, when Gloucester is offered the hand and he can't see, there's no cliff. So when the Master rejects it, it's a rejection of faith in the Doctor, because he's this kind of antitype. But actually, your much longer reading is far more interesting now, because it's all too obvious that the Eighth Doctor is clearly a messianic figure. And yeah, I think he doesn't descend into hell. I think 10 as weird Gollum fairy thing, because of what he witnesses happening on Earth. He has a vision of hell, and then the whole kind of. I mean, at the time of Victorious, I think he's rubbish in the Waters of Mars, because where does it go straight after that? He appears on the planet of the Ood wearing a hat and a feather boa, like he's been on a hen do, and it's weird. It doesn't track narratively, but I think you're reading into Matt Smith. I think that's right, because that's a happy Doctor who's really put through the ringer and then emerges. Actually, emerges as Capaldi, doesn't he? It's kind of reborn, angry old man thing,
which I love.
Yeah, it is awesome. But yeah, so there we got Doctor Who as Jesus figure, although more messianic figure, I think, but certainly resurrected, and he does come back to life when they make a hash of regeneration in the began thing.
Yeah. Also with 12, obviously you've got Missy literally caricaturing Asgard.
Yes, and Capaldi does say, what is he say when the robot says we're looking for the promised land, and Capaldi says, so am I. I'm not going to find it either. And so there's that weird balancing of belief and disbelief that you always find in Doctor Who, because they're always a bit wary about theology. Very, very.
It's the whole Jesus thing or religion thing, I guess, that you encounter with Superman, where if he's all-knowing and he's good, the wars.
Yes.
Because in the beginning of World War II, everyone was like, why is Superman not helping? We know he's fake, but why is he not helping? And they made it so he went to get drafted, and they did an eye vision. He accidentally used X-ray vision and reads the thingy the next room over, so like the reading chart.
Right.
So he gets like stopped from entering war, and I think that's a really interesting sort of aspect of it, because they have to acknowledge, no matter how much they put Superman or the Doctor or Luke Skywalker in these messianic positions, they have to acknowledge there is a limit, otherwise they're going too far.
Which of course is partly what Alan Moore is doing with Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen, because if you've got an omniscient being that can see into the future, it shuts down all those possibilities. So there's that amazing panel where he's striding through the Delta in Vietnam and just annihilating all the Viet Cong, brings an end to the war. But of course, because he doesn't emote in a quote unquote human way, he kind of short circuits that possibility. But I think that because you've got characters here, the Doctor, Superman, Jesus has human emotions. Therefore, these figures have to have human emotions. So the Superman figure, when he turns up in Watchmen, isn't Superman. He's a far more Nietzschean Superman.
What about Spock then?
What about Spock? Spock dies to save the crew.
Yeah. Just in the whole idea of that, I think Spock is the most blatant version of he's Jesus, but he's also like he's, I want to say Jewish American, but
I think absolutely.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Or like at least some sort of narrative there of that division.
Yeah, I think so.
Because you've got Vulcan, that like divine, superhuman, that thing, and then that human side.
Yes.
And obviously he's been read in so many different ways. I mean, he created fan fiction, which I think is wild. And it's that thing of he refuses to show his human emotions a lot of the time. So how would you think that goes into the Jesus narrative?
It doesn't quite work, does it? Because Jesus wept, famously, is the shortest sentence in English language. He has friendship groups. He
love using that way to describe.
He does, though, doesn't he? Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are his friends. We're told that, and it's the great, why didn't you save him? It's that same question you just put there, why couldn't you save him?
Yeah.
But he's only asleep, because of course that's a kind of, it's a proto-vision of that resurrection story. Just as you've got like Jonah and the whale is a vision of both the womb and the tomb. So narratively, the writers of these various biblical books are reading back against this material and looking at these topics, which is then happening here. I suppose Spock only really, when he stops being Spock, so when he's resurrected, when he has all those strange behaviours in Star Trek 4, but it's still not quite the way of engagement, because I think in the first of the films, he's about to enter Polonar, isn't it, where he's got pure logic. His response to the sound of Vija stops him. That's the human moment for Spock there. The problem is when he gets to the ship, because he spent so long, because he spent so long trying to remove the humanity from him, he can't, even what's an odd way to engage with people anyway, he even can't work at that level.
Yeah.
So it's not, again, it's not a perfect analogy, but I think he dies to save the ship, and then he comes back to life on a planet that starts off as Genesis, but the way it's shot in the third film, it's kind of a hellscape. It's all reds and blacks, and there's things that come out, that, talons that are going, and then the bad version of Klingons turn. So it is like a child in hell. You're not convinced?
I am convinced. It's the more I think about it as well, the more I'm like,
Wrecking our own argument.
Yeah. Just go for it. But also with the whole, as much as I am like, he doesn't show human emotions how expected, he obviously an autistic character. I don't think it's hard to read Spock as an autistic character. That's just a part of him.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting just in the way that every time he does show human emotion, they kind of represent it in the most like as bad. Like they either represent it as bad or very good.
Yeah.
And I think that's just an interesting way to do it whilst also making him Jesus.
Yes. So autistic Jesus.
Autistic Jesus.
I mean, I haven't really thought of Spock as on the spectrum. I think that's right, isn't it? And again, there's a whole run of academia in the last 10 or 15 years of looking at historical figures, but also fictional characters. And usually the argument is that people are aware of neurodivergence but don't know what it is. And so you describe the characters behaving in ways that we would recognise as neurodivergent. Whereas the writers of Star Trek, they haven't quite got that excuse anymore.
No.
But I think
it works.
I know, I think so. I think it definitely works. Absolutely. And we've got a couple of other TV ones that aren't quite fantasy, but you are going to argue at some point that at least one of them is a fairy tale in a future episode. So where are we going?
You haven't watched either of them.
No, of course I haven't. I'm old. I'm old.
And I'm a nerd. So Troy Barnes from Community.
Right.
Is, I think, during the season 3 arc, a messianic figure.
Right. Which
is an insane statement. But basically, so they're at Greendale Community College, and he's hunted down by this, like a separate part of the community college that's the air conditioning. This is a very brief sector of it. This air conditioning thing, and they're like, "You are the one true repairman. You're the truest repairman who can repair." This is a TV show that aired 2015.
Yeah.
And they're like, "You are the one truest repairman. You like come save us," basically. And there's a guy that introduces him to it, the vice principal, and he's like, "Hey, I once thought this was me. I'm ashamed to admit I once thought I was this Jesus figure, but it's you." And he eventually sacrifices himself and becomes a part of the repair school to save his friends from an insane man. And he sacrificed himself, and then and it is hell. He has no friends. He's literally there going, "I miss Albert. I miss my best friend.
Yeah.
I want to go home so bad," and he can't. And then he gets out of there by being put in like a chamber and battling someone to the death. And then he escapes, and it's like this big, "Oh my god, yay, Troy's back." And that's a very brief description, but he does follow the sacrificial thing. So
I'm convinced.
Everyone watch season. It goes off Community. Netflix,
all of Community there. That gets the Meg seal of approval.
It's a problem.
It's fine. And who else?
Roy Kent from Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso again, another show to watch.
It's great. I'm slowly making all my friends work through Community and Ted Lasso. It's awful. But he sacrificed himself in the final. This is all season 1, so it's okay. He sacrificed himself for the final play on the pitch, and then he goes down and he is forced to not do football, and it's hell for him. It's literally like he's on Sky being like a pundit, and he has like a breakdown, being like, "I hate everything. This is awful." He's like, "I can't swear. This is atrocious." And then he is reignited and reintroduced into the football pitch, and that's him sort of coming to. And it is, again, just that very basic going to hell, coming back and becoming a teacher and becoming someone that everyone looks up to. And he continues to the end of the series being someone that everyone looks up to and is a very proud person. It's just dope. I think he works very well, and I do think Ted Lasso is a fairy tale.
Which we will be coming back to.
Which I'm going to start just scribbling notes
down. We are going to come back to. So we've got across a range of media there, these figures who die literally or metaphorically.
Yeah.
Usually to save other people or for some sense of salvation or for a group or for other people.
Yeah. And
they come back usually after some vision of hell or a descent into hell, and there's a teaching motif going on there as well. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to finish up with Captain Sheridan from Babylon 5. The most loved and hated science fiction franchise of the late 90s. Sometimes it's really bad, but mostly it's absolutely awesome. Sheridan, as many of you will know, goes to Zahadum, the domain of the shadow. So before he dies, he essentially makes this descent into this hellscape. He dies there in order to draw the shadows away from Babylon 5 to try and strike a blow against them during the war. And he dies in the underworld. We're told explicitly that he's dead. He meets the godlike figure of Lorien there, and he has to make a decision whether to give in to Tick or Tok to return to life. He returns to life to lead the forces into the final battle. And we're told, why are you worshipping him? By the security chief who's kind of fallen out from Garibaldi. He says he's not the Pope. He doesn't even look like her. So the religious element is quite clear. It's all over Babylon 5 there. But Sheridan as messianic figure who dies and comes back, does die again then at the very end of it. And there's a sense of that he's ascends into a higher state of being. But there you can see absolutely a messianic figure and a clear use of the Jesus narrative there in late 90s sci-fi. Just as Doctor Who had done in 96. So there's something I think there in that weird 90s where you can't really get sci-fi on TV here. But in American sci-fi, you've got this clear use of Judeo-Christian narratives there, which because they're so common, people can use them. But it is similar to what looks like the use of established narratives in the first century by those early gospel writers. And on that, Meg, I think we'll say thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And we will see you again for more fairy tales and unusual places.
Sick.
Thank you all. See you soon.